My name's Andy Bealer.
Andy Bealer.
hmm
Awesome. And what's your favorite food?
Well, I'm a red meat person, so I like steak, burgers. Yeah, any red meat will do good.
I'm with you right there. I'm with you on that. So, how often do you travel?
Well, I used to travel quite a bit, but now not so much, mostly locally. But every once in a while, when there's a need, I get on an airplane and go. So this year, about 3 times so far.
Oh, that's awesome. So, what do you do here at FBC Branson?
Well, I'm the missions pastor, and so I'm helping serve our church by educating and equipping the members of FBC Branson to be on mission with God.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, why did you choose to come work at FBC?
Well, you could say I chose to work here, but I think it was kind of chosen for me, meaning I never really planned to work at FBC Branson. But I was a member years ago when I first came to know Christ, about 40 years ago. I went away in ministry, pastoring, and mission work. And then 2015, felt like a change was up. And talking with the former pastor, Neil Franks, he invited me to consider coming on staff part-time. And so I thought there might be some possibilities there. So we came back here to Branson and started serving in this position part-time then. So it's kind of chosen, not really something I went after, but came to me.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and I like it.
So, what's one thing everyone should know about missions?
Well, that's a good question. I like to tell people that actually missions is for everyone. Missions is following Jesus Christ and being a disciple of Jesus, because missions is God's work, and He's at work in the world. Whenever we're following Him, then technically we're on mission. He's on mission. He's a missionary God. So whenever we're following Him, then we're on mission with Him. So I like to think of every believer as a missionary of some sort or another.
So, what's something you would say about global missions?
Okay, well, global missions is just changing your location. So when we're following Jesus locally, it's very likely when we're faithful in following that He will open up doors in other places. So global missions is important because there are places in the world that have limited access to the gospel, and usually they're far away. Usually there are all kinds of restrictions. You know, it could be geographical, it could be political, it could be religious. Barriers to the gospel. And so there are a lot of places in the world where Jesus isn't worshipped and where He's not known. And so there's a good reason for believers to get on planes and go to those places internationally, globally. So.
That's awesome. So, what's the current state of global missions?
The current state? Wow. The current state of global missions. Well, there are about 3 different types of people in the world. Okay, there's the reached world, there's the unreached world, and there's the unengaged world. And the reached world is where Christianity seems to be doing pretty well. The unreached part of the world is where there might be a few believers, but there's not a strong reproducing church. And then the unengaged part of the world, which I'm just going to take a guess and say about a third of the world, is unengaged with the gospel. That means there's no church present there, and there's no believers that we know of. And not only that, there's no one that we know of in the Christian world who's focusing on that group of people. And so, for example, one of our partners in Southeast Asia, they've identified 14 unengaged people groups, meaning there's nobody even working among them to bring the gospel to them. But they know they're there, and they've developed a strategy to reach them. So there's still a lot of work to do, it seems like, until global missions is done and the work is finished.
So, why should local Christians care what's going on over in the Middle East, China, Australia, with global missions?
Well, local Christians should care because it's very much the heart of God. He says in the Word that His blessing to Abraham was to be a blessing to all the families of the earth, and that Jesus made it pretty clear that the gospel was intended to go to all nations, and once it reached all nations or people groups in the world, then the end would come. And the book of Revelation, it sets a beautiful picture for us that at the end of the age, there will be a throne in which Jesus is sitting on the throne, and people from every tribe, tongue, and nation will be there worshiping him. And so it ought to be important to Christians that indeed is an important part of their life, to see that fulfillment, to see people groups and peoples from unreached places worshiping Jesus. And so it's a great joy to be able to do that, to take the gospel to places that have never heard it.
So how many missions projects is FBC currently involved with?
Well, we currently have about 24 ministry partners, mission partners. Those exist locally here in Branson and the state of Missouri, throughout the U.S. and internationally. So 24 of them currently.
Cool. And how many of those have you traveled to, and how often do you travel to them?
Well, I've traveled to most of them, and it's a little easier when they're locally, but sometimes the local ones, because I know they're here locally, I don't get out to see them as often. But I think it's important for us as a church to, if we're going to partner with a ministry, for us to not only give and support them, but pray for them, but also go knock on their door and visit them. So once a year would not be too often for me if we were knocking on their doors at least once a year and seeing how they are doing.
Awesome. So how can a normal, everyday person contribute to global missions or even missions in their backyard?
Okay, well, that's great. That's great, because I believe mission starts for the believer of being an obedient follower of Jesus Christ. And when we're following him, he said, he will make us fishers of men. So for me, it just begins with when you get up in the morning and you begin the day, there's an opportunity to be partnering with our church on mission by praying for our partners, by getting updates from them and praying for things that they're praying about, but also just opening our eyes locally and seeing where is God at work around us. There's so many opportunities, from local prisons to internationals that God has brought into Branson, living in this area, that we can be friends with, we can welcome them, we can invite them in our homes. Learning to share our testimony for sure is really important in sharing the gospel. And so being with a group of believers who have a similar passion to make Jesus known, and going with them, going together with them to share your testimony, to share the gospel, and just to show up and see what God's already started to do and what he's invited us to be a part of with him.